Waitress circled words on Mafia boss's bill. It read, "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." The steam from the industrial espresso machine hissed, fogging the small window that looked out onto the rain-slicked New Jersey street. It was 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and Belladonna Trattoria was dead. Lena Marcelli, 24 and bone-tired, wiped down the marble-topped bar for the third time, her movements mechanical. She was good at being invisible. It was a skill she had perfected over the last 3 years. Ever since she'd fled her stepfather's suffocating, violent world, invisibility was survival. Here, at Belladonna. She was just Lena, the quiet waitress with the dark, watchful eyes, the one who never missed a shift and never spoke out of turn. The maroon apron, the smell of garlic and stale wine that clung to her clothes, the low bun she twisted her hair into. It was all camouflage. The bell over the heavy oak door chimed, a cheerful sound that felt wrong in the heavy, damp air. Lena didn't look up immediately. Sal, the owner, was already moving from the back, straightening his tie, a gesture reserved only for a certain kind of clientele. The whispers started instantly from Maria, the other waitress, who was polishing glasses by the register. "It's him," Maria breathed, her knuckles white on the glass. Lena finally looked. He didn't make an entrance. He absorbed the room's attention. He was tall, dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than her apartment's rent for a year. His black hair was cut short, his jaw severe. He wasn't handsome in the way movie stars were. He was striking. Carved from hard materials, he was Dominic Varelli. Even in a place like this, a neighborhood joint that quietly catered to connected families, Varelli was a ghost story made real, the head of the Varelli crime family. He moved with a heavy, coiled stillness, his eyes scanning the empty booths before settling on the one in the far corner, the one with a clear view of the front door and the kitchen exit. He sat in her section. Lena felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She grabbed her small, black notepad, smoothed her apron, and walked over, keeping her eyes downcast. "Good evening. What can I get you?" Her voice was steady, blessedly flat. Didn't look at the menu. "Espresso. Double." His voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet, deep, quiet, and final. She nodded, turned, and went to make it. She could feel his gaze on her back, assessing, cataloging. It wasn't the leering look she sometimes got from customers. It was colder, more analytical, like he was deciding if she was a threat or furniture. She was furniture. She had to be furniture. She brought the small, white cup and saucer to his table. He was looking at his phone, but she knew he was aware of her every move. She set it down gently, making sure not to rattle the porcelain. "Will there be anything else, sir?" He just lifted his chin, a silent dismissal. Lena retreated to the relative safety of the bar, trying to rub the tension from her temples. Maria was vibrating with nervous energy, but Lena just wanted the man to drink his coffee and leave. Men like Dominic Varelli brought trouble. They were walking storms, and she had spent her whole life learning to stay out of the rain. She was refilling the salt shakers when the back door, the one that led to the kitchen, the dumpsters, and the alley creaked open. It was only supposed to be used by staff. Lena's head snapped up. Her blood didn't just run cold. It evaporated. It was Marco Petrucci. She hadn't seen him in 4 years. Not since the night she'd packed a bag with shaking hands, stealing $38 from her stepfather's dresser to buy a bus ticket. Marco, the ghost. Her stepfather's trigger man. A hollow-eyed, twitchy degenerate who smelled of cheap whiskey and gun oil. He wasn't kitchen staff. He wasn't a customer. He slipped through the door, his eyes scanning the dining room. He didn't see her, or if he did, he didn't recognize her. She was just a waitress. He was looking at the man in the corner booth. Marco's hand was inside his worn leather jacket, resting on something heavy. This wasn't a social call. This was business, her stepfather's business. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her throat. If a gun went off in here, if that world and this world collided right here, her invisibility was gone. They would find her. Her stepfather would find her. She looked at Dominic Varelli. He was stirring his espresso, oblivious. A target. She had maybe 10 seconds. Her mind raced. Yell? Scream gun? Marco would start shooting, and she'd be the first to go down. Do nothing, let it happen? But this was her safe place. She grabbed the leather billfold from the counter and a pen. She walked back to Dominic's table, her legs feeling like wet cement. He looked up, annoyance flashing in his dark eyes. "I'm not finished." "Your check, sir," she said, her voice a strained whisper. She dropped the billfold onto the table. He stared at her. Not the bill. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't stop them. She clicked the pen. "I'm sorry, I forgot to—" She flipped open the billfold, grabbed the heavy cardstock bill, and turned it over to the blank back, shielding it with her body from where Marco was now pretending to look for the bathroom. Her pen flew. Her handwriting was sloppy, desperate. "Gunman behind you. Deal gone wrong. Exit now." She circled the entire frantic message, pressing so hard the pen nearly tore the paper. She slid it in front of him, next to his coffee. "Have a good night," she breathed, and turned. Walking away without looking back, she didn't make it 2 steps. She heard the quiet snick of the ceramic cup hitting the saucer. She saw Dominic Varelli's eyes lift from the bill, not to her, but to the reflection in the dark window behind her. He didn't panic. He didn't jump. He just shifted. Marco was 3 tables away, his hand coming out of his jacket, the dark metal of a suppressed pistol clearing the leather. Dominic moved. It wasn't a brawl. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and brutal piece of physics. He didn't stand. He exploded from the chair, using the table as a pivot. The heavy oak chair he'd been sitting on was kicked back, colliding with Marco's shins just as Dominic's hand shot out. He didn't go for the gun. He went for the wrist. Lena heard a sharp, sickening crack. Marco screamed, a high, thin sound that was cut short as Dominic's other hand grabbed the front of his jacket, pulling him forward, off balance. Dominic's elbow connected with Marco's nose. Another thud, and Marco collapsed, a boneless heap on the checkered tile floor. The gun skittered across the floor, stopping near the jukebox. The entire restaurant was frozen in absolute silence. Then, 2 other men Lena hadn't even registered, who'd been sitting at separate tables, nursing sodas, were on their feet. They weren't customers. They were bodyguards. One man kicked the gun away and hauled the groaning, bleeding Marco up by the collar, dragging him toward the back door like a sack of garbage. The other man simply stood by Dominic, his suit jacket open, his hand resting near his own hip. Dominic Varelli calmly brushed a speck of dust from his suit sleeve. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the mess on the floor, then at Sal, who was pale and gripping the kitchen door. "My apologies, Sal," Dominic said, his voice as calm as if he were remarking. "We're leaving. You should close for the night." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of bills, peeling off several $100 notes and dropping them on the bar. "For the trouble." His eyes found Lena, who was clutching a stack of napkins, her knuckles white. And for her, he walked to the door. As he passed her, he paused. He didn't thank her. He didn't threaten her. He just looked at her. A long, unreadable, cryptic stare that peeled back her invisibility and saw everything underneath. It was assessment. It was curiosity. It was danger. Then the bell chimed, and he was gone, swallowed by the rain. Sal locked the door behind him. "Everyone," he said, his voice trembling. "Go home. We had a plumbing emergency." Lena didn't remember the walk home. Her shift wasn't over for another hour, but she'd fled, grabbing her jacket and her bag. The image of Dominic's eyes burned into her memory. The rain soaked through her thin coat, but she didn't feel the cold. She lived on the 3rd floor of a pre-war walk-up, the kind of place with flickering fluorescent lights in the hallway and neighbors who knew how to mind their own business. She climbed the stairs, her keys in her hand, her mind replaying the crack of Marco's wrist. She reached her door, apartment 3, B, and stopped. The door was ajar. Just a fraction of an inch, a sliver of blackness. She knew, with absolute, paralyzing certainty, that she had locked it. She checked the deadbolt 3 times every morning. This was the fear she recognized. This was her stepfather's fear. Cold, invasive, and patient. She pushed the door open. The metallic scrape of the deadbolt sliding across the floor confirmed it. It had been locked and then opened. Not forced. Her tiny apartment smelled wrong, underneath the scent of her lavender soap. There was a faint, musky odor of men's cologne. They hadn't ransacked the place. That would have been a relief. This was worse. This was a search. The single cushion on her second-hand armchair was slightly crooked. The drawers in her small kitchen dresser were closed, but not all the way. In her bedroom, the worn comforter was smooth, but her mattress was off-center from the box spring by less than an inch. They had looked for something, or someone. They had been quiet, professional. They hadn't broken the lock. They'd picked it. A message. "We know where you sleep. We can get to you any time." Lena slid down the wall. Her back against the door she now had bolted, chained, and blocked with a chair. She sat in the dark, shaking, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel invisible. She felt like a target. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. When the sun came up, painting her dirty window gray, she washed her face, changed into her other uniform, and went back to Belladonna. Running was not an option. Running meant they were right. The restaurant was empty, save for Sal, who was scrubbing the floor tiles where Marco had fallen with a frantic, bleach-scented energy. He didn't mention last night. Neither did she. At 3 in the afternoon, the deadest part of the day, the bell chimed. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. It was Dominic Varelli. He was alone. He wore a gray cashmere overcoat, the collar turned up. He sat in the exact same booth. Lena approached. "He asked for your section." Sal whispered from the kitchen pass-through, his face pale. She gripped her notepad. Her hands were steady today. Fear had burned itself out, leaving a cold, hard resolve. "Sir." "Coffee, black." She brought it to him. He watched her, this time. He didn't look away. "You have good eyes." "Lena." Her name on his lips was a violation. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you," he said. Not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. "Lena Marcelli, 24, stepdaughter of Robert Bobby Russo. You've been working here for 34 months. You pay your rent in cash. You're very good at being invisible." She gripped the edge of the tray. "I don't know any Bobby Russo." A small, humorless smile touched his lips. "Don't lie. Not to me. You knew Marco Petrucci. It wasn't a question. I saw a guy with a gun. He was there for me. Part of a deal that, as you correctly noted, went wrong. But they weren't just there for me. They were there for you. Russo and the Caruso family. They've been looking for you. Seems you're a loose end. You seeing Petrucci just confirmed you were in this city?" He took a sip of the coffee. "You saved my life. Or, at the very least, prevented a significant inconvenience. I just work here." "Thank you," he said. It sounded strange. Sincere. "They searched your apartment last night." She froze. "That wasn't me. That was Caruso. They were looking for you." He leaned forward, and his quiet intensity filled the entire booth. "You're in trouble, Lena. The worst kind. Your cover is gone. You're no longer furniture." He offered her a ride home. "No," she said, the word sharp and automatic. "No, thank you." He nodded, as if expecting it. Stubborn, good. He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card. It was thick, heavy, cream-colored stock. There was no name, no address, no number, just one word. Embossed in black, severe script, safety. "They will come for you again," he said, placing the card on the table. "Not to search, when they do. And you decide you want to live, use this. How? It's just a word. My men are watching this restaurant. They'll be watching your apartment. If you're seen holding this card, they'll know you've accepted my offer." He stood up, dropping a $50 bill on the table. "Don't take too long, Lena." He left. Lena stared at the card. Safety. It felt like a trap. It felt like the very thing she'd run from. She snatched it, her shift over, and stuffed it deep into the pocket of her jeans. That evening, the rain returned. A cold, miserable downpour. Lena walked fast, heading for the subway. She pulled her collar tight, scanning the street, a black Escalade, windows tinted to infinity, turned the corner. It slowed, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. It was pacing her. This wasn't Dominic's men. His men were subtle. This was a predator. Lena's heart hammered. She turned a sharp corner, breaking into a run. The subway station was 2 blocks away. The green glow of the entrance sign was a beacon. The SUV mounted the curb, cutting off her path. The passenger door flew open. A large man in a dark hoodie lunged out. "Come on, sweetheart," he snarled. "Mr. Caruso just wants to talk to you." Lena screamed and threw her hot coffee in his face. He howled, batting at his eyes, but it only bought her a second. He grabbed her arm, his fingers like a steel trap. "No!" she yelled, kicking, fighting, a squeal of tires, sharp and expensive, a black Maserati sedan, appearing from nowhere, slammed to a stop, blocking the Escalade. 2 men in the same dark, tailored suits as Dominic's bodyguard emerged. "Let the girl go," the driver said, his voice calm. The man holding Lena hesitated, then snarled. Reaching for his waistband, Dominic's men didn't wait. They moved with the same brutal efficiency she'd seen in the restaurant. The driver struck the man in the throat, a precise, silent jab. The other man took Lena by the shoulders, pulling her back as the man in the hoodie crumpled to the sidewalk, gagging. Lena was hyperventilating, pressed against the cold brick wall. The driver straightened his tie. He looked at her, his expression detached. "Miss Marcelli, Mr. Varelli insisted we see you home. I can walk," she stammered, gesturing toward the subway. "I'm afraid that's no longer an option," the man said. He opened the back door of the Maserati. "He is waiting for you." The man from the Escalade was already forgotten, groaning on the wet pavement. This was a different kind of safety. It wasn't a request. She looked at the dark, open door of the sedan. She looked at the man choking on the sidewalk. She thought of the card in her pocket. She hadn't needed to show it. They already knew. Numb, her fight gone. Lena Marcelli slid into the back of the car. The leather was soft, and the interior was warm. The door shut with a heavy, final thunk, a sound like a vault closing. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the gritty streets of her neighborhood behind. They weren't heading toward her apartment, they were heading for the highway, toward the secluded, fortified hills, toward the Varelli compound. The Maserati moved with a silent, predatory grace, swallowing the miles of dark highway that separated the city's grime from the insulated wealth of the hills. Lena sat rigid, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles ached. The man beside her, the one who had neutralized her attacker with such casual violence, hadn't spoken a word. They left the highway, climbing a winding road shrouded in dense forest. Finally, wrought iron gates, 30 feet high and spiked at the top, loomed in the headlights. They didn't just open, they retreated, sliding into stone walls with a heavy, oiled groan, like the entrance to a fortress. The estate was not a house. It was a statement of power, a sprawling stone mansion that blended old-world Italian architecture with modern, brutalist security. Dark, tinted windows reflected the manicured grounds. Men in dark suits, visible, unlike the ones in the restaurant, stood near the entrance, their presence as fixed as the stone gargoyles. Lena was escorted inside, not touched, but herded by their proximity. The interior was vast, cold and silent. Marble floors, dark wood paneling, and ceilings so high they seemed to steal the air. She was led to a study. Dominic Varelli was not sitting. He stood by a fireplace, though no fire was lit. He had changed from his suit into a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers, making him look less like a boss and more like a panther at rest. The room smelled of old books and faint, expensive cigar smoke. He dismissed the men with a flick of his chin. The heavy door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous room, leaving the two of them alone. "You should have taken the ride home this morning," he said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "I don't take rides from strangers," Lena said, her own voice sounding thin and reedy. "I'm not a stranger. Lena, we've established that." He motioned to a leather chair. "Sit." She remained standing. "I want to go home. Your home was compromised by Robert Russo's men last night. Tonight, it was Caruso's. You no longer have a home. What do you want from me? I did what you wanted. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything. He moved from the fireplace, stopping a few feet from her. He was impossibly still, his dark eyes fixed on hers. That's the problem. Your name came up. My men intercepted chatter all afternoon. The failed ambush at the trattoria. The girl who passed the warning. You. I was just... You, he interrupted, his voice dropping. Became a liability. You confirmed to Russo's crew that their lost girl was found, and you showed Caruso's crew that I have a new asset. You're a loose end they both want to tie, and you're a vulnerability they think I have. I am not a vulnerability, she spat, fear making her bold. I'm nothing to you. That's where you're wrong. He was closer now. You stopped being nothing when you wrote on that bill. You're no longer invisible, Lena. You're the most visible person in this city right now. So what? You lock me up? Am I a prisoner? I'm keeping you alive, he stated flatly. Russo wants to silence you. Caruso wants to use you. To get to me. To get to his real target, your stepfather. The name hit her like a physical blow. My stepfather. Russo and Caruso are partners in an arms deal. The one you warned me about, but partners in our world. They rarely trust each other. Caruso believes Russo is holding back, using you as some kind of insurance. He's wrong. Russo just wants you dead. Lena's legs finally gave out. She sank into the leather chair, her head swimming. They were at my apartment. They tried to grab me. They will not stop, Dominic said. You will stay here, at the estate. My men will protect you until this is over. Over? How is this over? I just want my life back. You can't have it. The finality of his words was brutal. You will stay here. She looked up. Tears of frustration, not sadness, stinging her eyes. And if I say no, if I walk out that door, the man who grabbed you tonight, he was told to bring you in gently. The next team will not be so polite. They'll put a bullet in your head or drag you into a van, and I won't be able to stop them. So, no. You cannot walk out that door. For how long? She whispered, the fight draining out of her. He mistook her question. The estate is fully secure. 27 acres. You won't be confined to this house. How long, Dominic? He paused, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. Until things cool down, until Russo and Caruso are dealt with. She felt the trap closing. This wasn't safety. It was a different kind of cage. But the alternative was the man on the sidewalk. One night, she negotiated, though she had no chips to bargain with. I'll stay for one night. To think. He knew she was lying. He knew she had no other choice. But he nodded. One night, he pressed an intercom on his desk. Gina, come to the study. A moment later, the door opened, and a young woman who looked to be in her late teens entered. She was the complete opposite of the house, bright, warm and modern, wearing jeans and a university sweatshirt. She had Dominic's dark eyes, but hers were full of life and curiosity. This is my sister, Gina, Dominic said. Gina, this is Lena. She'll be staying with us. Gina's smile was genuine. Oh, thank God. Someone under 50. Hi. She stuck out her hand. Lena took it, surprised by the normal, friendly gesture. Lena. Lena will be staying in the blue guest suite. See that she has everything. Dominic ordered clothes, food, whatever she needs. Got it, boss, Gina said with a mock salute, then winked at Lena. Come on. He's way less scary when you're not in the murder office. I'll show you the kitchen. We have real food, not just intimidation and whiskey. Dominic's eyes followed them, and Lena felt, for a second, that his protective gaze included them both. Gina led her through the house, keeping up a stream of cheerful chatter that felt jarringly normal. Don't mind the statues. Dom thinks they're imposing. I think they're creepy. The kitchen is this way. Maria, our cook, makes a killer carbonara. As they walked, they passed a sitting room where two men stood as they entered. One was older, in his 60s, with silver hair and a sharp, bespoke suit. He held a thin tablet. The other was the man who had driven her here, built like a refrigerator, his hands clasped behind his back. Oh, hey, Leo, Rocco, Gina said. Gina, the older man said, his eyes flicking to Lena, assessing her with a cold, intellectual precision. This is Lena? She's staying with us? Gina announced. We're aware. Leo, the consigliere, said. His tone was not welcoming. He looked at Lena as if she were a column of numbers that didn't add up. Dominic had introduced her to his world, the muscle, Rocco, who obeyed, the brain, Leo, who questioned, and the heart, Gina, the one thing he kept shielded from it all. Later that night, Lena stood in the guest room. It was larger than her entire apartment, with silk wallpaper and a bed that could sleep 6. Gina had brought her a tray of food and a set of soft pajamas, treating her not like a prisoner, but a guest. She couldn't sleep. She walked to the French doors and stepped out onto a small, stone balcony. The air was cold and clean. Far in the distance, the city lights of New Jersey and New York glittered like a spilled box of jewels. It was a view of a world she was no longer a part of. You shouldn't be out here. She turned. Dominic was on the adjoining balcony, separated by a low stone divider. He was nursing a small glass of amber liquid. I needed air, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. He stepped over the divider with effortless grace, landing silently on her balcony. He stopped several feet away, respecting her space. You're safe here, he said. Am I? She looked at him, the moonlight catching the hard planes of his face. This life, the men with guns, the silence. How do you live like this? He took a sip of his drink. It's the only life I know. It's the only way to protect what's mine. Gina? He nodded. My sister, my men, this house. It's all I have. It's a prison. Dominic, you're just as locked in as I am. A flicker of something, anger or perhaps sadness, crossed his face. It's protection. There's a difference. Is there? She challenged. I'm just a pawn. You're using me. Just like Caruso. I am protecting you, he said, his voice low and intense. If I were using you, I'd have left you on that street for Caruso's men to find, and I would have used the resulting chaos to wipe him out. Do not mistake my actions. He fell silent, swirling the liquid in his glass. You have a choice. Lena, I can give you one right now. She waited. Option 1. You stay here, under my protection. You live in this house. You follow my rules, and you wait until I have eliminated the threat. You will be safe. You will be provided for. But you will be mine to protect. And option 2, I make you disappear. He said it so calmly. Not like Russo wants. A real disappearance. A new name. A new identity. A new life. A flight to somewhere far away. You will have enough money to start over, and no one will ever find you. You'll be invisible again, but you will be gone. Forever. And you will be alone. She stared at him, the weight of the two options crushing her. One was the gilded cage, the other was the lonely, terrifying freedom she had lived in for 3 years, only this time, it would be permanent. She would be a ghost. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. Why? He asked, his voice softening. What are you so afraid of? Being controlled, she answered, the truth tearing out of her. Being owned. Is that what he did? Dominic's voice was barely audible. Lena looked away, at the glittering lights of the city. The pressure of the day, the attack, the house, the choice, it all shattered her carefully constructed walls. A sob escaped her, small and broken. My stepfather, she began, the words thick and tasting like ash. He didn't just hit, he controlled everything, the air I breathed. He liked the fear. He liked knowing he was the only reason I was still alive, that he could end me. She was crying now, silent, hot tears running down her face. She wasn't talking about the arms deals. She was talking about the nights she'd hidden in the closet, the sound of his belt buckle, the smell of his whiskey. I ran. I got out. I made myself invisible so no man could ever have that power over me again. She looked at him, her face wet, her eyes pleading. And now I'm here. And you're offering me the same choice, a cage or oblivion. Dominic stood frozen. He hadn't moved. He hadn't reached for her. He had just listened. His hands, she saw, were clenched at his sides, his knuckles white. His jaw was so tight a muscle pulsed. He was not calm. He was simmering with a white-hot, contained rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was a rough, gentle whisper that cut through the cold night air. "No one will ever touch you again." He said it like a vow, a sentence passed on anyone who tried. He took one step, and then another. He was in her space now. He slowly lifted one hand, not to her body, but to her face. His fingers were warm, his thumb calloused. He brushed a tear from her cheek, his touch surprisingly tender. "I am not him," he said, his dark eyes searching hers, demanding she believe him. Lena's breath hitched. She was standing in front of the most dangerous man she had ever met, and for the first time in her life, she felt safe. She leaned into his touch, a magnetic pull. He was so warm. His other hand came up, cradling her face, holding her as if she were something infinitely precious. He was looking at her lips. The air crackled. The distance between them vanished. He kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not the kind that demanded or took. It was a kiss of comfort. It was firm and warm and heartbreakingly gentle. It was a promise. It was breathing after being underwater for a lifetime. His lips were soft, moving against hers with a hesitant reverence. Lena's hands, which had been fisted at her sides, came up, gripping the front of his cashmere sweater, holding onto him like an anchor. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear, her relief, and her sudden, terrifying spark of want into it. The kiss deepened, just for a moment, his thumb tracing her jawline, her lips parting on a sigh. And then, he pulled away. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. His breathing was heavy. "I won't take what you're not ready to give, Lena," he rasped, his voice thick. Not ever. He was giving her back the control. He was showing her he was the one thing her stepfather never was, a choice. Before she could respond, he stepped back, putting the cold air between them once more. "Get some sleep. You're safe in this room. No one will enter." He turned and, with that same impossible grace, stepped back onto his own balcony, disappearing into the shadows of his room. Lena stood there for a long time, her fingers pressed to her lips, her world tilted on its axis. Miles away, in a smoke-filled room in a different part of the state, a man lit a cigar. He stared at the manila envelope dropped on his desk. "Is this it?" he grunted. "Yes, Mr. Caruso." Caruso tore it open, spilling a dozen grainy, long-lens photographs onto the polished wood. They were of the Varelli estate, of the grounds, of a young woman walking with Gina Varelli, of the same woman, standing on a balcony. Caruso picked up the photo of Lena on the balcony. He tapped the ash from his cigar. "So," he said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face, "the ghost, Dominic Varelli, brought her home. The fool." The first 72 hours in the Varelli estate were a lesson in gilded suffocation. Lena woke up in a bed with a thread count, higher than any number she had ever possessed, in a room that looked like it belonged in a European palace. Sunlight. Her old enemy from her days of sleeping on a futon was muted here, filtered through heavy, cream-colored drapes. She was safe. There were no sirens, no footsteps in the hall outside her flimsy door, no fear of a key turning in the lock. But she was not free. Everywhere she went, she was watched, not overtly, not with the barrel of a gun, but with the silent, peripheral awareness of Dominic's men. Rocco, the mountain of a man who had driven her, seemed to materialize in doorways whenever she strayed too far from the main hall. An elderly woman, who Maria the cook called Nonna, brought her meals but spoke no English, her dark, judgmental eyes saying enough. Lena felt like a ghost haunting a house that was already full of them. The opulence was oppressive. The silence was louder than the city traffic she was used to. She was safe from her stepfather, safe from Caruso, but she was trapped in Dominic Varelli's world. Only Gina offered a lifeline. On the third day, Gina knocked on her door, a genuine, 1,000-watt smile on her face, her arms full of shopping bags. You can't keep wearing my old sweats, Gina announced, dumping the bags on the massive bed. They're comfortable, sure, but they make you look like a depressed college student, which, I guess, is redundant. Lena touched the soft fabric of a dark green sweater. You didn't have to do this. I know, I wanted to. Gina flopped onto the bed, ignoring the opulence she'd grown up with. Dom's orders were whatever she needs. He's big on cryptic commands. I just figured you needed to feel like a person. Jeans, a few sweaters, some actual underwear that wasn't bought in a 3-pack. You know, the basics. Thank you, Gina. Lena's voice was thick. It was the first act of simple, uncomplicated kindness she'd received in years. Hey, it's nothing. Gina's expression sobered for a moment. It's weird here. I know, it's not a normal house, but my brother, and he's not what you think. What is he, then? Lena asked, folding the jeans. He's Dominic, Gina said, as if that explained everything. He's all I've got, and he protects what's his. And, well, you're here. So, welcome to the What's His Club, I guess. The perks are terrible, but the security is top-notch. Gina's friendship was a small, warm light in the vast, cold house. But as the days bled into a week, the suffocating stillness returned, broken only by the evenings. Dominic visited her each night. It was never a social call. It was a check-in, an inspection. He would find her in the small, glass-enclosed conservatory where she'd taken to reading. He would stand in the doorway, dark and imposing, and they would trade clipped, tense sentences. "Did you eat?" he asked one night, his eyes on the book in her lap. "Yes, Maria's carbonara," she replied, not looking up. "Do you need anything? A key, a way out." His eyes hardened. "You have everything you need. I have everything you think I need." The air between them was a tangible thing, thick with unspoken words, with the memory of that kiss on the balcony. It was an electrical current, humming, dangerous. He was a man of absolute control, and she was the one variable he could not solve. She saw the way his eyes lingered on her, the faint tightening of his jaw when she met his gaze with defiance instead of fear. He was waiting for her to break. She was terrified she would, but not in the way he expected. She was afraid she would lean into this strange, violent safety. One night, the house was too quiet. The air was heavy, charged with an approaching storm. Lena couldn't sleep. The silk sheets felt like a shroud. She paced her room, then, driven by a restless energy she didn't understand, she slipped out. The hallways were dark, but faint. Motion-activated lights lit up pools of the floor as she walked, guiding her like a moth. She didn't know where she was going until she found herself in front of two massive carved wooden doors. The library, Dominic's murder office, as Gina called it. She pushed one door open. It swung inward without a sound. The room was dark, save for the blue-white moonlight streaming through a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the gardens. And it was here she felt him the most. The scent of old paper, leather, and that faint, spicy scent that was just him, drawn by an irresistible pull. She walked to his desk. It was massive, a slab of dark mahogany. It was immaculately clean, except for one corner. There, propped against a heavy bronze inkwell, was a single silver-framed photograph. She picked it up. It was Dominic. But it wasn't. The man in the photo was 20, maybe 21. He was smiling, a real, unguarded, almost reckless smile. He was leaning against a beaten-up pickup truck, a fishing rod in his hand, a baseball cap turned backward on his head. There was a lightness in his eyes, a complete absence of the crushing weight and cold calculation she saw every day. He was just a young man, happy. "I gave you the run of the house," Lena gasped, her heart leaping into her throat. She dropped the frame, and it clattered loudly on the desk. Dominic stood in the doorway, a black silhouette against the dim hall light. He was in a black t-shirt and dark gray sweatpants, his feet bare. He looked raw, stripped of his cashmere armor. "I did not," he continued, his voice a low, lethal purr, "give you the run of my private office. I couldn't sleep," she stammered, her hand still on the frame, as if to shield the boy in the photo from the man in the doorway. He stalked into the room. The moonlight hit him, illuminating a fury so cold it burned. "So you come here? To poke through my things?" "I wasn't poking," she said, her own anger rising to meet his. Why was he so angry? It was just a picture. "I saw the light. I was curious." He was in front of her now, snatching the frame from her grasp. "Curiosity is a liability." "What is so wrong?" she challenged, gesturing to the photo he now held. That you smiled once? That you were a person before you became this? You know nothing about this," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "You know nothing about me." "I know what I see," she shot back, her voice rising. "I see a man who lives in a fortress, who talks in threats, who thinks he can own people. You call it protection. You call it safety, but it's just a bigger, more expensive cage, and you're the one holding the key. I am the one keeping you alive," he roared, his control finally snapping. The sound was shocking in the silent house. "And what a life," she cried, tears of sheer, helpless frustration stinging her eyes. "Waiting for you to visit me, to tell me if I'm allowed to breathe. I ran from a man like that. I will not be owned by another." His eyes blazed. He grabbed her arm. "I am nothing like him." "Aren't you?" she whispered. The fight suddenly gone, replaced by a devastating sadness. "You're both just men who think you can lock me up to get what you want." The words hit him harder than a bullet. He recoiled, his hand dropping from her arm as if he'd been burned. He turned away, his back to her, his hands braced on the desk. He was breathing heavily, fighting for the control she had just shattered. When he turned back, the anger was gone. It had been burned away, leaving something raw and infinitely more dangerous. "Desire. You," he whispered, his voice rough. "You have no idea what you do to me." He crossed the 2 feet between them in a single step. His hands came up, not to strike, not to hold, but to possess. His fingers tangled in her hair, tilting her head back. His other hand snaked around her waist, yanking her hard against him. She gasped, her body colliding with the solid warmth of his. "You walk into my house," he breathed, his lips ghosting hers. "You defy me. You look at me with those eyes, like you're not afraid of me, like you see me." "Dominic," she breathed, her hands on his chest, but she wasn't pushing him away. "You drive me insane, Lena," he whispered, and then his mouth was on hers. This was not the kiss on the balcony. That was a question. This was the answer. It was brutal and deep and desperate. It was a collision. He kissed her like he was starving, like he was trying to devour her, to erase the line between them. His lips were hard, demanding, and she met him with the same pent-up, frantic energy. She clawed at his shirt, pulling him closer. It was a fight for control, and they were both losing. He backed her against the heavy desk, his body pinning hers, the hard wood pressed into her back. He kissed her jaw, her neck, his mouth hot against her skin. "Dom," she gasped, her head falling back. "Tell me to stop," he demanded, his voice thick, his lips at her ear. "I can't," he growled, a low, animal sound, and claimed her mouth again. He lifted her, sitting her on the edge of the desk. He stood between her legs, his hands sliding from her waist up her sides, his thumbs brushing the swell of her breast. Lena's mind, her body, her entire world had shrunk to this single point. The feel of his hands, the taste of his mouth, the solid, unshakable presence of him. She felt, for the first time, not like a prisoner, not like a victim, but like a choice. His choice. Just as his hand moved from her side, just as his lips began to trail lower, a sound ripped through the night. Thwack! It was a muffled, ugly sound, then another. Dominic was a different person. In 1 second, the man holding her was gone. The boss, the predator, took his place. He was off her, his head up, his body coiled. "What was that?" Lena whispered. "Thwack, thwack, thwack." "Silencers," he breathed. Then, from downstairs, the unmistakable, shattering crash of the conservatory glass exploding inward. "Down," Dominic roared. He didn't guide her. He shoved her. Lena tumbled off the desk, landing on the thick Persian rug behind it. "Stay Down. He was already moving. He yanked open a desk drawer, pulling out a heavy, black pistol. He didn't even look at it. He just knew. The library doors burst open. 3 men dressed in black tactical gear, masks covering their faces, stormed in. They weren't expecting Dominic. They were expecting her. They raised their weapons. Dominic didn't hesitate. He was a shadow in the moonlight. He fired twice, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. 1 man dropped, the other 2 scrambled, firing back. Bullets ripped through the desk, splintering the wood above Lena's head. She screamed, curling into a tight ball. Dominic didn't stay still. He used the desk as cover, but he was always moving. He was a blur of brutal efficiency. One of the men lunged at him. Dominic met him, his pistol now empty. Useless, he didn't need it. He grabbed the man's extended arm, using his momentum to twist. Lena heard a loud, wet snap. The man screamed. Dominic didn't stop. He drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man crumpled, gurgling. The 3rd man, the last one, saw it. He turned to run. "Rocco!" Dominic bellowed. The mountain of a bodyguard filled the doorway, his own gun in hand, and leveled the 3rd man with a single, massive fist to the face. The house was suddenly alive. Lights flashed on. Shouts echoed from the grounds. Boots thudded on the marble floors. It was over in 30 seconds. Dominic stood in the center of the room, breathing heavily. His t-shirt was torn. A thin line of blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. He was, in that moment, the most terrifying and beautiful thing she had ever seen. He looked at the carnage. Then he looked at the desk. "Lena!" She was frozen, her hands over her head. He walked over, his gun discarded, and crouched down. His hands were gentle. "Lena, it's over. You're safe." He pulled her to her feet, his hands on her arms, holding her steady. She was shaking so violently her teeth chattered. He pulled her against him, crushing her to his chest, his hand covering the back of her head, shielding her from the sight of the men on his floor. He was furious. She could feel the rage rolling off him in waves, but his hold on her was protective. Rocco and Leo, the sharp-faced consigliere, were in the doorway. Leo's face was white. "The south perimeter was cut," Rocco said, his voice grim. "They knew the patrol route. They knew the blind spots. This was inside help." Dominic's hold on Lena tightened. He turned, his face a mask of cold death. "Who?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Who betrayed this house? I want a name. Leo, I want it now." "We're checking," Leo said, his voice shaking. "We have the grounds on lockdown. The breach. It matches the signature on the men at the trattoria. It's Caruso." The name hung in the air. Caruso. Lena's blood went ice cold. She pulled away from Dominic, just enough to see his face. Caruso, her stepfather's ally. The restaurant wasn't just a deal gone wrong. The men at her apartment weren't just a message. This attack... "They weren't here for you," she whispered, the pieces clicking into place. Dominic turned his head, his black eyes meeting hers. "They came to the library," she said, her voice shaking but gaining a horrifying clarity. "This room. They didn't come to the master bedroom. They didn't go to the vault. They came here. They were looking for you," he finished. The same terrible realization dawning on his face. The kiss, the attack, it was all one. He looked at Leo. "They weren't here to kill me. They were here to take her." He looked back at Lena, his expression unreadable. She was not collateral. She was not a liability. She was the bait, and the trap had just been sprung. The adrenaline evaporated, leaving the metallic, coppery smell of blood and the sharp stink of gunpowder. Lena's ears rang with the echo of the shots. In the library, 2 men were dead, and a 3rd was groaning, being dragged out by Rocco. Dominic had not let go of her. His arm was a steel band around her waist, pinning her to his chest. He was still vibrating with the lethal energy of the fight. A human weapon just barely returned to its sheath. He was looking at the splintered desk, the ruined books, the violation of his sanctuary. "They came for you," he said again, his voice a low, guttural sound. He turned her, his hands gripping her shoulders. His eyes were black, pupils dilated, the cut on his brow bleeding sluggishly. "Do you understand me, Lena?" She was shaking too hard to speak. She just nodded. Good. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion save a chilling finality. Because this changes everything. You wanted a choice. You wanted to leave. He shook his head. A single sharp motion. The choice is gone. You're mine now. Lena's breath hitched. I'm not a thing. I don't care what you are, he snarled, his grip tightening, pulling her closer. You are the one thing they want, which means you are the one thing I will not give up. They will have to bury me to get to you. It was a vow, a sentence, and a threat, all in one. He was treating her like property, and the old, familiar fear clawed at her throat. But as she looked at him, at the blood on his face, at the unshakable fury in his eyes, fury for her because of her, she felt something else, something she hadn't felt in her entire life. She felt completely, terrifyingly safe. She pushed back, not to escape, but to stand on her own feet. No, she said, her voice finding a strength she didn't know it possessed. His eyes narrowed. I won't be a princess locked in your tower, Dominic. I won't be your prized possession waiting to be stolen. She gestured to the dead men, to the chaos. That's what happens when I'm bait. I'm tired of being bait. I'm tired of being a victim. You are not a fighter, Lena. You don't know that, she cried. I've been fighting my whole life. I fought him. She jabbed a finger toward the door, toward the outside world that held her stepfather. I survived. I got out. Nah, and I know him. I know his codes. I know his tricks. They want me. Then you're going to use me. He stared at her, the shock on his face more profound than when the gunman had burst in. Leo, standing in the doorway, looked appalled. Dominic, the girl is in shock, Leo said, stepping forward. She's not in shock. Are you? Dominic asked, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm angry, Lena said, her voice cold and level. I'm angry that they tore up my apartment. I'm angry that they tried to grab me off the street, and I'm furious that they broke into your home and put your family at risk. All to get to me. She stepped closer. So you can lock me in the basement, or you can let me help. A long, tense silence stretched, broken only by the sound of Rocco giving orders in the hall. Dominic studied her. He saw the defiant tilt of her chin, the absolute lack of fear in her eyes. She wasn't the trembling girl from the trattoria. She wasn't the woman who broke down on the balcony. This was someone new, forged in the violence of the last few minutes. He gave a single, curt nod. Leo, take her to Salvo. Give her access. Everything we have on Caruso and Russo. Leo looked like he wanted to argue, but the look on Dominic's face stopped him. As you wish. The surveillance room was in the sub-basement, a climate-controlled bunker that hummed with the quiet power of a dozen servers. Salvo, a pale, thin man in his 20s who seemed to live on energy drinks, looked at Lena with open skepticism. The boss said, give you access, not a tutorial. Salvo muttered, his eyes glued to a bank of monitors. Just show me the raw intercepts, Lena said. Anything between Caruso's network and an unlisted source. For 3 hours, she worked. Salvo, impressed by her silence and focus, started feeding her data streams, watching her. Lena wasn't a hacker, she wasn't a spy, but she was the daughter of a monster, and she had learned his language to survive. She scanned encrypted message logs, lines of nonsensical code, until her eyes burned. It's all noise, Salvo said, cracking another can. We've been on this for weeks. Caruso is clean. He's not clean, Lena murmured, scrolling. He's just... Careful. She stopped. A data string flagged from 2 weeks prior, a payment to an offshore account. The reference code was just a jumble of letters. RKD 88V. Wait, she said, her blood running cold. Go back. Can you cross-reference that code? It's a dead end. Probably a shell corp. It's not a shell corp, Lena said, her voice shaking. She grabbed a piece of paper and wrote it down. RKD. Robert Russo, her stepfather. 88. August. 1988. The month her mother died. V. Vineyard. His code for his primary supplier. That's him, she whispered. That's my stepfather. She looked at another string. Tanti saluti al re. Greetings to the king. 3 kings, she said aloud. He's moving the arms deal. The one you intercepted, he's moving it now. He's planning to cut Caruso out, and he's using me as the distraction." Salvo's fingers flew across the keyboard. He's right, the payment code. It just unlocked a new directory. My God, you're in. Lena had just handed Dominic Varelli the keys to her stepfather's entire operation. While she was in the basement, Dominic was holding court in hell. The emergency meeting took place in the formal dining room, a long, dark table of polished mahogany that felt like a coffin. The heads of the other major families were there, men in expensive suits with the cold, pragmatic eyes of CEOs who dealt in bodies. They were not happy. An open attack on the Varelli estate was an attack on the stability of their entire world. Lena watched from the upstairs gallery. Hidden in the shadows, she saw Dominic at the head of the table, a portrait of absolute, lethal calm. He had stitched the cut on his own brow. "The situation is contained," Dominic said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "Contained?" One old, wheezing boss named Falcone snapped. "You have a war on your doorstep. Dominic Caruso is making a play, and he's using your new pet as the excuse." Caruso, pointedly, was not there. Just as Falcone spoke, Leo entered, carrying a single, unadorned cell phone. He placed it in front of Dominic. It was ringing. Dominic looked at it. He let it ring twice more, a power play, before answering and putting it on speaker. "You have a lot of nerve, Dominic." Caruso's voice, oily and confident, filled the room. "You have a lot of nerve being alive, Arturo," Dominic replied, his voice silky. "You're making this personal. You took something that was part of my business, a loose end, Russo's girl." "She's not Russo's. She's mine." A short, ugly laugh. "Is she? I'm offering a simple trade, out of respect for our grandfathers. Give me the girl. Walk away. This all stops. No war. Or, Caruso said, his voice hardening. "I'll burn that stone house of yours to the ground. I'll take the girl off your corpse. This is your one and only chance. Hand over the girl, or this is war." The line went dead. Every eye in the room was on Dominic. This was the test. Trade a nobody waitress for peace. It was the smart move, the business move. Dominic leaned back in his chair. "He's bluffing, he's desperate. Russo is screwing him, and he's using me to try and scare Russo into compliance. He has no intention of starting a war he can't win." He dismissed them. But Lena, watching from the shadows, saw it. When he thought no one was looking. Dominic's hand, resting on the table, was clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. He wasn't calm. He was a barely contained inferno. Later, she found him in the study. The room had been cleaned, the bodies gone, but the air still felt violated. Rain had begun to fall, lashing against the windows, a welcome sound that blurred the world outside. He was standing by the window, staring at his own reflection. He held a glass of whiskey, but he wasn't drinking. "You heard the call," he said. He didn't need to turn to know she was there. "I did." She walked up behind him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "He called your bluff." "It was a good play," Dominic said, his voice flat. "They all think you should give me to him." Lena said, "It wasn't a question. They're businessmen. It's the practical choice. But you're not going to." He turned, his eyes finding hers. The rain hammered against the glass, isolating them. "No, I'm not." "Why?" she whispered. "I'm a waitress. I'm a liability. I'm the one who brought this to your door." "You are," he said. He reached up, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch shockingly gentle. "And you are also the only person who has ever looked at me and not been afraid." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Not of me," he corrected. "You looked at the boss, the monster, and you saw a man. You're the one who sees me." She saw the deep, aching loneliness behind his mask, the crushing weight of the crown. He was the one in the cage, and he'd been there his whole life. "You're not alone in here, Dominic," she whispered, her hand coming up to cover his, pressing his palm against her cheek. The control in his eyes, the carefully built walls, crumbled. The loneliness she saw was replaced by a raw, staggering need. He leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closing, his breathing ragged. "Lena," he breathed, his voice breaking. It was the first time she had ever heard him sound anything less than certain. She didn't hesitate. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not the desperate, angry kiss in the library. It was not the gentle promise on the balcony. This was a surrender, a mutual one. His arms went around her, pulling her flush against him, and he kissed her back with a depth of emotion that stole her breath. It was a kiss that spoke of isolation, of rage, of a desperate, clawing need to feel something other than control. The rain lashed the windows, a chorus to the storm inside him. He lifted her, and she wrapped her legs around his waist without a thought. He didn't stop kissing her, carrying her out of the ruined study, up the grand staircase, and into the sanctuary of his bedroom. The room was dark, the only light coming from the fireplace, which his men must have lit earlier. The rain was deafening here. He set her down gently by the bed, his hands framing her face. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers in the dim, flickering light. He was asking. "I'm nervous," she admitted, her hands shaking as they rested on his chest. "So am I," he whispered, and the admission stunned her. She smiled, a small, watery thing. Good. She was nervous, but she was also bold. This was her choice. After a life of having her body be a source of fear and pain, she was reclaiming it. She was reclaiming trust. Her fingers went to the buttons of her own shirt, but he stopped her, his hand covering hers. "Let me," he rasped. His movements were slow, deliberate, reverent. His fingers, which she had seen break a man's wrist, were now trembling slightly as they undid each button. He wasn't taking, he was being given. He pushed the shirt off her shoulders, his eyes never leaving hers, and his touch was a question, not a demand. He kissed her shoulder, his lips warm, and she sighed, her head falling back. It was a slow, sensual unveiling. His touch was protective, as if he were memorizing her, worshipping her. When she stood before him, she felt no shame, only a powerful, profound sense of being seen. He undressed, his eyes never leaving hers, and she saw the scars that littered his torso, old wounds from a life she couldn't imagine. She reached out, her fingers tracing a long, thin scar near his ribs. He flinched, not from pain, but from the simple, unexpected tenderness of her touch. He pulled her to the bed, and they fell into the sheets, into each other. It was a slow, passionate exploration. He was a man of iron control, but with her, he was letting go. He was protective and passionate, and his reverence for her was a balm on every old wound she carried. He kissed her, and moved on her, and with her, and every touch was a promise. "You are safe. You are mine. I am yours." And as the rain finally began to subside, giving way to the quiet dark of the early morning, Lena, held in the arms of the most dangerous man in New Jersey, finally, truly, let go. The morning light was gray and diffused. Lena woke first, wrapped in his arms, his breathing deep and steady against her hair. The dynamic had changed. She could feel it in the way his arm was draped over her, no longer just protective, but fiercely possessive. He woke the instant he sensed her stir, his eyes snapping open, clear and sharp. He looked at her, and a small, unguarded smile touched his lips. "They're not going to stop," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I know." Lena sat up, pulling the sheet with her. "They're not going to stop, and we're not going to wait." He watched her, his expression unreadable. "I'm not going to be the girl behind you. Dominic, I'm not Gina. I'm not someone you hide. Not anymore." She turned to him, her eyes holding his. "I'm going to stand beside you. We know their plan. We know their codes. We're going to confront them." His smile faded, replaced by the calculating look of the boss. "A confrontation is a war, Lena." "Then it's a war," she said, her voice hard. "But it's one we start. We hit them before they can hit us again." He saw the steel in her, the woman who had survived, the woman who had decoded the enemy. He nodded once. "We planned the confrontation." They discussed it, right there, In the quiet of the morning, their voices low, they would set a trap. Use her knowledge, use Caruso's paranoia against him. Neither of them saw the figure in the hallway. Nona, the elderly, silent housekeeper, was collecting the morning linens. She paused outside the master bedroom, her head bowed, her hands clasped. She heard the low murmur of their voices, a man's and the new woman's. She heard the words confrontation and Caruso. She nodded to herself, a small, imperceptible motion, and continued on her way, her face a mask of loyal, silent service, the false peace held for 2 days. 2 days where Lena moved through the house with a new, dangerous confidence. Her nights spent in Dominic's bed, their mornings spent planning in the rebuilt study. She had started to believe that the stone walls were as impenetrable as he claimed. She was in the garden with Gina, breathing in the cold, late autumn air when the world tore open. It was not a full-scale assault. It was a surgical strike, fast, silent, and aimed only at her. One moment, Gina was laughing, pointing to a half-frozen rose. The next, she was screaming. 3 men in black tactical gear emerged from the dense, overgrown hedge line, a part of the grounds the gardeners hadn't touched, a blind spot. They weren't shooting, they were grabbing. "Lena!" Gina shrieked. Falling backward, one man seized Lena by the arm, his grip a vice, a black, gloved hand clamping over her mouth. She fought, kicked, bit down on his glove, but he was too strong. He was dragging her feet skidding on the damp grass, pulling her back toward the hedge. "Dominic!" Gina's scream was a raw, primal sound. Lena heard the thud of running feet on the gravel path. Dominic and Rocco, moving as one, came around the corner of the house. Dominic didn't have a jacket. He was in his shirt sleeves, his face a mask of primal fury. "Let her go!" he roared. The man holding Lena didn't hesitate. He shoved her toward his 2 accomplices and drew his weapon, firing not at Dominic, but near him, forcing him to take cover. Rocco returned fire, but the men were using Lena as a shield, dragging her into the shadows of the trees. Dominic exploded from cover. He didn't run at the gunman, he ran at her, a flanking, desperate move. He was a blur, tackling the man closest to her. His movements the same, brutal, efficient, hand-to-hand combat she'd seen in the library. A shot rang out, impossibly loud in the quiet garden. It was not Dominic's. It was not Rocco's. It was the third man, the one who had been holding her, now raising his pistol at the man brawling on the ground, at Dominic. "Dom!" Lena screamed. Dominic looked up, then out, his eyes wide. Just as he disarmed the man beneath him, he was a fraction of a second too late. He tried to roll, to stand, to shield himself. The bullet struck him. He grunted, a sharp, choked sound, his body stiffening. He didn't fall, but he staggered, his hand flying to his side, his face pale with shock. The man who shot him grinned and leveled the gun again, this time at Dominic's head. Rocco was too far away. Occupied with the first man, Gina was frozen in terror. The world went silent for Lena, the man Dominic had tackled. His gun had skittered across the patio stones, landing near her feet. She didn't think, she didn't plan. She saw Dominic, bleeding. She saw the man aiming. She lunged, grabbing the heavy, black pistol. It was cold, so impossibly heavy. She'd never held one. Her hands shook. Her arms trembled. She tried to lift it with both hands, a clumsy, desperate motion. The gunman saw her. He laughed, a short, barking sound, and turned his aim from Dominic to her. She squeezed the trigger. The sound was a physical blow, a deafening explosion that punched the air. The recoil slammed her backward, and she stumbled, falling to the stone, her ears ringing. She had missed. The bullet had torn a chunk of bark from the tree, 6 feet to his left, but it didn't matter. The shot, the sheer animalistic fury of her action had broken his focus. It bought the 1 second Dominic needed. Despite the blood now spreading across his white shirt, Dominic launched himself. Not with grace, but with raw, agonizing force. He hit the gunman low, a spear tackle that sent them both crashing into the hedge. Rocco was there a moment later, his large hand ending the fight with a single, sickening crack. The estate alarms were blaring now. The remaining attacker was gone, vanished back into the woods. Lena was still on the ground, the gun a few feet from her, smoking. "Lena," Gina was sobbing, shaking her. "Lena, are you okay?" But Lena's eyes were on Dominic. He was on his knees, his head bowed, his hand pressed tight against his left side. Rocco was at his side, tearing at the shirt. "Boss," Rocco said, his voice strained. "Boss, you're hit." "I'm fine," Dominic gritted out, but when he pulled his hand away, it was covered in dark, slick blood. Get her inside." He looked at Lena, his eyes finding hers. He wasn't looking at her with fear or anger. It was a strange, dark pride. Then his eyes rolled, and he slumped forward, caught by Rocco's massive arms. The family doctor was a small, neat man named Varelli, who looked more like an accountant than a surgeon. He worked in Dominic's study, the scent of antiseptic warring with the old books. The bullet had passed through, a clean, lucky shot that had missed ribs and organs by inches, but it was the blood loss and the shock. Dominic was pale, his face slick with sweat, but he was awake and he was furious. Lena sat in the chair by the desk, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She was no longer shaking. She was cold. She was a block of ice, and at her center was a single, burning point of rage. "It was Nona," Salvo said, standing in the doorway, his face pale, his laptop open. Dominic, lying on the leather sofa, his side bandaged, turned his head. "What?" "Nona, the housekeeper. She's gone," Salvo typed. "And so is the hard drive for the South Garden's backup security. She used a high-level admin code. She must have been listening. She must have given them your plan, your location." The mole. The kindly, silent old woman who had brought Lena soup. "Find her," Dominic ordered, his voice weak but lethal. "It doesn't matter," Lena said, her voice dead. Dominic and Salvo both looked at her. "Find her or don't," Lena continued, standing up, the teacup rattling. "They'll just send someone else, and someone else. They'll keep coming. Dominic, they'll keep cutting the wires and finding the blind spots, and they'll wait until you're not fast enough. They'll wait until they get me, or they kill Gina, or they put you in the ground." "Lena," Dominic warned. "No." She walked to the sofa, standing over him. She looked at the white bandage, the dark blood that was already beginning to seep through. "This is my fault, my past, my monster. I'm done letting him hunt me. I'm done being your liability." "You are not a liability," he gritted out. "This," she said, pointing to his wound, "says I am. I am bait, and bait is meant to be used." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to give him what he wants. I'm going to give them what they want. They want me. They can have me, on our terms." Dominic tried to sit up, a gasp of pain escaping his lips. "Absolutely. I will not hand you over." "You're not handing me over," she said, her voice rising. "It's a trap. It's the only way this ends. We set the meat. We leak that you're furious, that I'm a traitor, that I got you shot, that you're selling me to Caruso to get this war over with." "He'll never believe it," Salvo said. "He'll believe it because it's what he wants to believe." Lena countered, her mind racing, the plan forming, sharp and clear. "He's greedy, and my stepfather is arrogant. They'll believe it. We make it look real. We draw them both out to one place, and we end it." Dominic was staring at her, his dark eyes burning with a combination of pain, rage, and a terrifying, reluctant admiration. "I said I'd lead," he whispered, his voice rough. "And you will," she said, her voice softening. She knelt by the sofa, her hand gently touching his, avoiding the IV the doctor had set. "But I'm the one who walks in. This is my fight. I'm just asking you to be my army." He fought her for an hour. He used logic, anger, and blunt commands, but she was unmovable. He was weak, and she was strong, her resolve forged in the garden, holding that gun. "Fine," he finally snarled, falling back against the cushions. "Fine, but one condition. Anything. You don't walk in alone. My men, my team. I lead the team. I am in your ear. I am the one watching through the scope. It is my plan. Lena, my trap. You are just the lure. Done." she said without hesitation. The next 2 days were a blur. Dominic recovered with a speed that was unnatural, driven by pure, cold rage, while he healed. Lena prepared. She confronted her fear. "I'm not a victim," she told Rocco. "But I'm not a killer. I need to know how to survive." So he trained her. In the gym in the sub-basement, he taught her. He didn't teach her to shoot. He taught her to run. He taught her how to fall without breaking. He taught her how to break a man's grip, using her size as leverage, not a weakness. He taught her how to use a hidden blade, a small, thin stiletto that Dominic had given her. "It's not about winning the fight, Signorina," Rocco said, his face impassive as he easily blocked her frantic jab. "It's about surviving it. 1 second, that's all you need. By 1 second for the boss to do his work." Gina helped, too. She helped with the disguise. "You can't look like you," she said, pulling out a drab, gray coat and a woolen hat. "You have to look like her, the girl from the trattoria, the girl who's been a prisoner. You have to look broken." The plan was set. Salvo leaked the message through an unsecured channel he knew Caruso monitored. "The boss is done. The bitch shot him. He's washing his hands. Red Hook, Pier 12. Midnight, 1 million, and she's yours. A fake handoff. An abandoned dockyard." Salvo had cameras everywhere. Tiny. Pinprick lenses on the light poles. 3 snipers, Dominic's best, were hidden in the rusting skeletons of the cranes. And Dominic himself was in a van, 2 blocks away, watching every feed, a headset on, Rocco at his side. "You're sure about this?" Gina asked, her voice small, as she helped Lena into the coat. "I'm sure," Lena said. Her hand, resting on the hidden blade strapped to her wrist, was steady. The night was cold, a biting wind whipping off the black water of the bay. The dockyard smelled of diesel, salt, and decay. It was a graveyard of shipping containers. A black sedan, one of Dominic's, pulled up. 2 of his men, dressed as enforcers, hauled Lena out of the back. They were rough, shoving her forward, making it look real. She stumbled, her hands tied in front of her. "This is it." Dominic's voice crackled in the tiny earpiece hidden in her ear. "They're here. 2 cars. East entrance." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She kept her head down, her shoulders slumped. Just as Gina had coached, headlights cut through the mist, a black Escalade and a beat-up sedan. Caruso emerged first. His expensive overcoat flapping in the wind, he looked smug, victorious. Then the passenger door of the sedan opened, and Robert Russo fell out. He was drunk. A bottle dangled from his hand. His face was a bloated, red mask of pure, unfiltered hate. "There she is!" Russo screamed, pointing a shaky finger. "The little bitch!" "Bobby, shut up!" Caruso snapped, his eyes on Dominic's men. "Business first. Where's the money? Where's Varelli?" Dominic's man, Rico, countered. "He said he'd be here." "He's a coward," Caruso spat. "He sent you to do his dirty work. Now, the money, and we take the girl." Russo was weaving, stalking toward Lena, his eyes wild. "You!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You ruined everything, my deal, my reputation. You think this wop wants you? You're trash. Just like your mother. She was worthless, and you're worse." Lena froze. The words hit her, a physical blow, stripping away the plan, the training. She was a child again, in the closet, listening to him rage. "Dominic," she whispered, a plea. "Stay focused, Lena." Dominic's voice was a low, furious growl in her ear. "He's baiting you. He's unstable. The snipers have Caruso, but Russo is a wild card." Caruso's men were fanning out, their hands in their coats. Dominic's men tensed. This was the moment. The deal was about to turn. Russo, in his drunken rage, pulled a pistol from his waistband. His hand was shaking. "I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish what I should have done 10 years ago." He was aiming at her. "Now, Lena," Dominic said. "Now. Create the diversion." But just as he said it, just as Russo's finger tightened on the trigger, Lena saw it. One of Caruso's men wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Rico, and he was raising his own gun. This was turning into a firefight, not an ambush. Lena didn't hesitate. She didn't follow the plan. She made a new one. with a raw-throated scream that was part terror, part fury. She didn't just pretend to flee, she broke. "No!" she shrieked. "I won't go with him, I won't!" She didn't run sideways, as they'd practiced. She ran forward directly toward the water, toward the dark, empty space between the two groups. It was a brilliant, suicidal move. Every single gun, which had been aimed at opposing forces, snapped to the running girl. Russo, Caruso, Dominic's men, Caruso's men, all of them followed the target. "What is she doing?" Rocco roared in the van, but Dominic saw it. "She's drawing their fire. All teams. Light them up! Now, now, now!" Lena had just given his snipers a clear field by making herself the only target. She had taken every other gun out of the fight for one perfect, critical second. The night exploded. Lena's scream was the starting gun. The instant she broke from the pack, Dominic's voice roared in her ear. "Light them up!" Muffled, high-velocity cracks echoed from the cranes. Two of Caruso's men, their guns still tracking Lena, dropped before they even heard the shots. Chaos erupted. Caruso's remaining men dove behind cars, firing wildly into the darkness. Dominic's team, led by Rico, returned fire from their position, a disciplined, overwhelming barrage. Lena kept running, her lungs burning, the wind whipping tears from her eyes. She was a lone figure in a no-man's land of screaming metal and thundering gunfire. A black van, its headlights off, screeched onto the pier, its side door sliding open before it even stopped. Dominic Varelli launched himself from the vehicle. He wasn't in his suit, he was in the same black tactical gear as his men, but he wore no helmet. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His eyes, even in the dark, fixed only on her. His wound was a non-factor, ignored by the sheer force of his will. He cut through the battlefield like a scythe, firing his pistol with a terrifying, calm precision, not to kill, but to move, to suppress any threat between himself and her. "Russo!" Caruso screamed, pulling his own gun, trying to get his men in order. "Get the girl! Get her!" Robert Russo was a man possessed, his drunken rage now focused by the gunfire. He saw Lena, and he saw Dominic charging toward her. He lunged, not at Dominic, but at the prize. "You're mine! You bitch!" he howled, grabbing Lena by the hair. She screamed as he yanked her back, her feet slipping on the slick pavement. He spun her around, his arm locking around her neck, his body a shield behind hers, the cold, shaking barrel of his pistol jammed hard against her temple. "Stop!" Russo shrieked, his voice cracking. "Stop, or I swear to God I'll blow her head off!" Dominic froze. He was 20 yards away. He had just dropped a man who had aimed at him, and now his own gun was raised, steady, centered on Russo's face. But he couldn't take the shot, not with Lena's head in the way. "Dominic!" Lena gasped, her hands clawing at the thick arm around her throat. "I see you." Dominic's voice was a low, shaking growl, a sound of such contained violence it was more terrifying than Russo's screaming. He slowly, agonizingly lowered his weapon, his eyes locked on Russo. His men, seeing his signal, also ceased fire. The dockyard went suddenly, horribly silent, broken only by the lapping of the black water and Russo's ragged, drunken breathing. "That's right." Russo spat, grinning, tasting his victory. He was bleeding from a graze on his cheek, but he didn't feel it. "The big boss, brought to your knees by me, by trash. You like her so much. You can watch her die. Let her go, Russo," Dominic said, his voice dangerously calm. "Let her go, and you might live." "Live?" Russo laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "I've got nothing. She ruined me. This thing. She ruined me. It's over, but I'm taking her with me." He was going to do it. Lena could feel the trembling in his arm, the final, desperate tension. He was a dead man with nothing to lose. Dominic took one small, agonizing step forward. "No. I'll do it," Russo screamed, jamming the gun harder into her temple. "Lena," Dominic said, his eyes on hers. He was not speaking to Russo. "It's okay." He was talking to her. He was telling her to be brave, but Lena wasn't listening. She was feeling. She was feeling the arm around her neck, the gun at her head, the old familiar terror, and a new, cold rage burned it all away. 1 second, that's all you need. Rocco's voice in her head. Her hands were still bound in front of her, but the blade was not in her hands. It was strapped to her right wrist, hidden by the baggy sleeve of her coat. She closed her eyes, her body going limp, a dead weight. "Please," she whimpered, a perfect imitation of the victim he thought she was. "Shut up," he snarled, adjusting his grip, annoyed by her sudden weight. It was the opening she needed. Her hand, which had been fisted, opened, her thumb subtly pressed the small, hidden catch on her wrist. The stiletto's thin, 4-inch blade slid silently into her palm, its hilt settling against her skin. Russo was ranting, his eyes on Dominic. You should have seen her mother. She was just as... Lena didn't wait. She didn't stab his arm or his chest. She did exactly what Rocco had taught her. She went for the easiest, softest target. She plunged the blade with all of her weight, all of her fear, and all of her hate down and back into the soft, thick meat of her stepfather's thigh. Russo's scream was not human. It was a shriek of pure, agonizing shock. His arm, the one holding the gun, spasmed. His grip around her neck broke. He instinctively looked down at the unbelievable pain in his leg. It was 1 second. The bang from Dominic's pistol was a single, clean, declarative statement. Robert Russo's head snapped back. He didn't make another sound. He just collapsed, a dead, heavy weight on top of her, pulling her to the ground. Lena screamed, scrambling out from under him, the warm, sticky blood on her coat. The stiletto still clutched in her hand. "Caruso's running!" Rico yelled. Dominic didn't look at Russo. He was already moving, striding toward Lena. He kicked the gun away from Russo's body, pulled Lena to her feet and crushed her to his chest, his hand on the back of her head. He was checking her, his hands running over her arms, her face. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice rough. "No," she panted. "No, I'm... Rocco, get her," Dominic ordered. The big bodyguard was there, wrapping a tactical blanket around her, pulling her away. "Get her to the van." "Dominic," Rocco said, pointing. "Caruso. He's in the warehouse." Caruso hadn't fled to his car. He had run, like a rat, into the dark, cavernous warehouse at the end of the pier. "I see him," Dominic said. He looked at Lena, his eyes black and unreadable. He was still the boss. He was still the killer, but he was hers. "It's over. Lena, go." He didn't wait for her. He handed his pistol to Rocco. "Take her. 1 gun, 1 clip. Get to the boat, now. I'll handle this." "Boss, no. Now, Rocco." He turned and walked, unarmed, into the black mouth of the warehouse. Inside, it was a cathedral of shadows and rust. Caruso was panting, hiding behind a stack of rotting pallets. He had a gun, but his hands were shaking. This was not his world. He was a businessman. "It's over. Arturo," Dominic's voice echoed, seemingly from everywhere at once. "Varelli, I had nothing. It was Russo. He was crazy," Caruso yelled, his voice thin with terror. "You came into my home." Dominic's voice was closer now, a soft, lethal whisper from the shadows. "You put your hands on my family. You put your hands on her." Caruso scrambled back, firing his gun wildly into the darkness. The shots were useless, loud and panicked. "You should have taken the deal." Caruso tried, his voice cracking. "Just a girl." A shadow moved. Dominic was on him. It wasn't a gunfight, it was a mauling. Dominic, wounded, unarmed, and fueled by a righteous fury, dismantled him. He broke Caruso's wrist, the one holding the gun. He drove his fist into Caruso's stomach, then his face. It was brutal. It was primitive. It was a punishment. Caruso lay on the ground, his face a bloody ruin. Spitting teeth. Just kill me," he wheezed. Dominic stood over him, his chest heaving. The cut on his side was bleeding freely now, his black gear hiding the stain. He looked at the pathetic man on the floor, and he saw nothing. He bent down, pulled a zip tie from his own tactical vest, and bound Caruso's hands. "No," Dominic whispered, his voice raw. "Killing you is a favor. You don't get favors." He heard the sirens, faint, but growing closer. The anonymous tip Salvo had placed. He walked out of the warehouse, leaving Caruso for the authorities, a gift-wrapped rival, discredited and broken, ready for a federal cell. Rocco had Lena at the end of the pier, where a sleek black speedboat was hidden, its engine rumbling in a low, quiet idle. She was in the boat. Rocco was on the dock. Dominic walked toward them, the sirens wailing behind him, the red and blue lights flashing against the buildings. He didn't run. "Get in, boss," Rocco said. His hand offered. Dominic took it, climbing down. He slumped into the seat next to Lena, his body finally acknowledging the pain. Rocco untied the boat, jumped in, and slammed the throttle. The boat shot out into the bay, a black needle disappearing into the night. Just as the first police cars slammed to a stop on the pier, Lena didn't say anything. She just reached over, her hand shaking, and took his, lacing her fingers with his. He was covered in blood, his Caruso's. He gripped her hand like he was a drowning man, and she was the only solid thing in the world. Days later, the compound was quiet. The sun was shining. The traitors, Nona included, had been dealt with, a phrase Lena was learning to accept. Caruso was in federal custody, singing, but his songs only implicated a dead man, Robert Russo. Dominic Varelli's name was never mentioned. His rule was absolute. Lena found him in the garden, the one where he had been shot. He was standing by the rose bushes, his shirt off, the doctor changing the dressing on his side. The wound was healing, but she saw the other scars, the old ones. A pucker mark from a bullet near his collarbone. A long, thin, white line on his back. She saw the scars of his life, the price of his crown. He was not a monster. He was a man who had been forced to wear armor his whole life. The doctor finished and left them alone. "It's over," she said quietly. "It's over." He agreed. He looked at her, his eyes clear. "You can go. Lena, that was our deal. I can make you disappear. The oblivion option, it's still on the table." She looked at the garden, at the stone walls. It was a cage. It was a fortress. It was, she realized, home. She wasn't the waitress from the trattoria. She wasn't the girl hiding from her past. She was the woman who had stood by his side. "I'm not afraid of you, Dominic," she said. "I know. And I'm not afraid of this." She gestured to the house, the life. "I don't want to be invisible. I want to be seen. By you." She chose to stay, not out of fear, not out of debt, but out of love. A difficult, complicated, and dangerous love. The next morning, he was in his study, back at work, signing papers. She brought him a cup of coffee, the way she had in that first, fateful night at the trattoria. He took it, his eyes on her, a small smile playing on his lips. She put her hands on her hips, a playful, confident gesture. "You know, this is all your fault." "Oh?" he said, feigning surprise. "If you'd just let me pay your check, I'd still be a waitress." She leaned over the desk. "Do I still get to circle things on your bills?" He set the coffee down and pulled her onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. He nuzzled her neck, his voice a low, happy rumble. "Only," he replied, his lips finding hers. "If you circle forever." The story ends. But their life was just beginning. They were walking, hand in hand, through the quiet garden. The danger was behind them, a scar, just like the others. But ahead of them, there was passion, there was loyalty, and for the first time, for both of them, there was peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We hope it brought you into the world of Dominic and Lena. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories. For more tales of loyalty, danger, and passion, we would love to hear your thoughts, so please share them in English in the comments below.